Hi everyone and welcome back. Today we'll be talking about one of the most important things in Java. It is called objects. And why is it important, you may ask? Well, Java is a program where it's object oriented, which is also known as OOP, object oriented programming. And we use objects to store different variables and just move them around like memories, like the data types that we see. But these we can store multiple, and we can transfer into different classes. We can identify different types, and we will dive into that real quick. So we have objects and classes. We didn't know classes, remember the header. So classes are just something that start like a body of code. So if you have like 5 lines of code, this is a class. And each object is an instance of a class. So if I have a class doe or something, class doe, and then I have an object here. What is this? A cookie. An object is an instance of this, right? So if this was the class, the cookie cutter, each of these are objects. So a better example, other than this picture, is if I had a class animal, then an object can be a dog, right? It's just an instance, like a subcategory of the class, you can say, right? So that's how we identify the relationship between objects and classes. Now we need to dive deeper into behaviors and attributes. So we have behaviors here is play, right? The cats are playing. And the attribute is the color, okay? And so these two things will describe different objects, behaviors, okay? So a behavior and attributes are things that describe the object, and there will be parameters inside objects that will use these to adjust what the object is trying to say or do, okay? And so when we create a new object, what we're going to do is, here's the format. It's the data type. Instead, it can be anything. Normally, it's the class name. And then we would have the object name equals new, the data type again. So these two are a repeat. And then here we have parentheses. And if you have any parameters, you go in here. So parameters are based off of your constructors, which we will discuss later on. But right here, just know that there needs to be parameters here if they're matching the constructor, okay? And we will talk about constructor layers. So this is the format of an object. This is creating a new object. It is declaring an object. So it's kind of like primitive, but we're having C1 and we're declaring a space for it, okay? And if you wanted to try string C1 after this line of code, it wouldn't work because C1 is already an object. So this would be wrong and it would give you an error, okay? So now I wanted to talk about methods, because methods is a very important way of expressing these Java classes. For example, if you had like a method for I want to eat something, you don't want to write it like 10,000 times. Instead, you want to have a method and you just call it whenever you need, which is much more convenient, right? And it's much more redundant. So the purpose of it is it's acting as short lines of code that can act as a substitution. The main word here is, the main word here is a substitution of code, okay? And so we have public, just like the header for a class, except here, the return type I'll talk about later, and here's the parameter list. And here's your body. This we don't have to worry about till later, okay? So what happens is you have a public return type is one of those primitive data types, or the string. So you have int, you have boolean, you have double, and you have string. Word types. There are also void, which means you're not returning anything. When I'm saying returning, you're giving the program an integer, a boolean, a double, a string, or you're just going to change something but not return anything. And I'm going to talk about what returning is, okay? Because we've been used to printing commands. Returning is a completely different aspect. And so how the methods are structured is, here's the heading, public, name, parameters, return type. This is your formula. Your body can be anything you want it to be, okay? And so that leads to our question, return versus the system.out.println, okay? So return is basically you're returning it to the computer. So for example, if we have a computer here, okay, and here's the keyboard, this is not the best drawing. Here's the lines of code. When you're returning something, you're giving it to the computer. But when you're printing out something, the guy would be able to see it. So if I said return hi, the computer would receive hi. But if I said system.out.println hi, then the person would be able to see hi. So what's the difference? So if I have a method here, I'm going to type this out. Public intro, no, public string intro, nothing. Okay, return hi. And then public, and then the main method right here. And then I need a new object. What's the class name? Introduction. This is not introduction. Testing equals new introduction. And then I had system.out.println. And then I would do testing.intro. Okay. So here, there's a lot of new things that we have to watch out. So here's the method. I forgot to put a closing bracket, okay? So each method needs an opening bracket and a closing bracket, okay? So here I have this method, it returns hi. Then we have this main method, we create the new object, okay? And if you want to use the method, you have to create the object of this class that contains the method. So if I had like public class introduction, not the best handwriting, but if I had the public class introduction, okay. Not that good at drawing brackets. So we needed to create this new object. So we have the object testing, okay? And when we want to call in a method, we need to testing, which is the object name, dot method name, okay? We will go in further depth of this later on. But what this does, it calls intro. It returns hi. But the thing is, we're returning hi, but this is only going to the computer. So here, if we had system.out.println hi, and then we had this statement, it would only, the reader that's watching the computer print out the output will only see hi. The second hi here will be stored into here. So if I were to do if I were to add this system.out.println here, this would also print out hi because it's returning hi. So this would be replaced by hi. And then we'd system.out.println this. So these two would print out the same if we had a system.out.println. So a return statement will give it to the computer to keep going. Because if I wanted to, that's not what I meant to do. Let's do that. Okay. So if I were to, let me erase this thing. Okay. If I were to system.out.println here, right, then this would print out two highs. Okay, just like I was saying. But if I were to do something like testing, like this, object name and then a method is acting like a temporary variable, right? This would contain hi, but if I were to add by, right, semicolon, and I would do string, I would initialize a new variable, string A. What this would be is that, remember string concatenation, it would be hi by. It would be hi by because testing.intro here would return hi, which is hi. And then hi plus by is by. But if I put here system.out.println hi, that doesn't work. You're printing out hi to the reader, but this is not being printed out. A is not being printed out. So that's why system.print.outline and return are very different meanings, and you have to be very careful. Okay. So here's a side note, we'll be going over implementing further methods in the next video, episode 5. So you just have to worry about methods and objects and how they work.